Hello and welcome back to Robbie's Arcade. Well, here we have it, Street Fighter 1, the game that started it all, and quite an intimidating message there on the screen. Let's have a look at that. Luckily I'm not in Japan, so in theory this isn't a crime, but carrying on. So, welcome to Robbie's Arcade. Today's episode is going to be about Street Fighter 1, the game that started it all, that I'll be honest with you feels absolutely nothing like the Street Fighters that have come later on. Even though, recently released was Street Fighter 5, that must be the 30th or 40th different Street Fighter game. And if you wanted to talk about clones and re-releases and updates and remasters, we've got to be in the treble figures by now. Street Fighter, one of Capcom's AAA titles, it must be the game they make the most money from, is easily their biggest title. And it all started with this, the 1987 game Street Fighter. I know you got some information there on the screen to read, and later on I'll tell you some interesting facts about this game. But I do think it's worth highlighting straight away that this is not a very playable game. Even by 1990s, early 90s standards, and definitely when compared with Street Fighter 2, I'll be going through some of the modded arcade versions of that later on in another video. But this Street Fighter game, although it started it all, it did do very, very well, apart from one, very well-known reviewing magazine that gave it a terrible mark. Nearly everyone rated it as a great game, and you've got to be honest, there weren't that many games like this at the moment of release. One-on-one beat-em-ups did exist, but the level and the fluidity and the ability to play and tactics were pretty few and far between. It was very luck of the draw, and there was very little skill that you could bring as an individual to the table. Now, Street Fighter 1 is not that skillful by compared to its later games. Doesn't have a combo hit system, doesn't have super moves, doesn't have counters, it barely has throws. But what you do have is a nice solid mechanic with which Street Fighter began. So, without further ado, let's get some credits inside this and get started. Once again, using my trusty SNES controller, there we go, always a classic. I'm running with a popular MAME software. So, let's go into this. First things first, we've got to choose who we're going to fight. Do you know what? I'm a Brit. Let's go take on a Brit. Birdie, those that are familiar with him, he entered into Street Fighter Alpha, I think 2 or 3. Now once again, I can't promise that this is going to go very well indeed. The moves themselves are not easy to perform. At the moment, this guy doesn't seem to be fighting back a vast amount. I don't know how long that will last. This is the longest I've gone in this game without getting my arse handed to me. But again, as you can see, the graphics, everything is incredibly limited on this, and we do have Hadouken at least, which is nice. This guy, you know what, this game's a lot harder earlier, got to give it to you. But the game itself, you can barely recognise it. It looks more like Streets of Rage than Street Fighter. The game itself is 2-round system. You could only play as Ken or Ryu, and even then you can only play as Ken in the 2-player mode, whereas in the 1-player, all you can be is Ryu. Now there is talk that this was based on a very terrible movie. One of those ones from the East that comes over with barely any subtitles. Oh, look at that. Finally, we have the Hurricane Kick. But the game itself, although it seems primitive as hell, this was the precursor of Street Fighter. And I know you're thinking right now, what is this Birdie guy doing? And you're right, he's doing nothing. Plus, he looks absolutely nothing like the Birdie of Street Fighter Alpha fame and more. But the game itself, you can just see little glimmers of what Street Fighter became here. Oh. Did you hear that? That awful rendition? Who the hell is Eagle? Who knows? A lot of the characters in this, I will go through some of the characters later on. This guy looks and seems to behave more like Rolento, to be honest. This guy doesn't seem to want to put up too much of a fight. Oh, now I say that. That was beyond annoying. If I wasn't on camera right now, you would hear some choice language. I would be cracking out the F's and the C's like you wouldn't believe. Right, now these moves, I'm a Street Fighter veteran. I know how to do all the moves. I know that it's down to back with kick to do that Hurricane Kick. But for some reason, it's not made very straightforward here. For example, I could get the how to do a Hadouken tattooed on my face. I know how to do it. I've been doing Hadouken since I was a teenager. This is getting quite tense, actually. There we go. But for some reason the moves are just not responsive on this. This game does have a reputation for being terrible to control, both the original arcade and later released emulations. But no, this guy Eagle, or Relento Jr. as I'm going to call him, or Blonde Relento, he doesn't seem to be putting up a vast fight. I know that blocking in this is far more tactical than in other Street Fighter games. Largely because the blocking system, it did have the early blocking that was up and down blocking. Getting trapped in a corner like this could spell curtains for me, to be honest, and there it did, I lost. You know, we will give that a second go though, but I'll tell you some facts about the game first. Fair play, that was a good attempt there at getting some original speech. But as I say, the game itself is primitive, there's no denying it. But you can see what was going to happen, you can see what the way Street Fighter was going to go. I mean, this continue screen is quite bizarre as well. Interesting facts about Street Fighter 1, the original arcade. Again, released in 1987, so I am only a few years older than this game. Originally developed by Capcom, of course. Capcom are never going to give up that license, in the same way Disney are never going to give up Mickey Mouse. Characters throughout the game, there were so many characters that people have either never heard of or were renamed later on, in the same way there's the Bison and Vega swap around in the east or the west. But Adon, Birdie, Eagle, Geki, Jen, Ken, Lee, Mike, Retsu, Ryu and Sagat, or Sagat, depending on your pronunciation. Of course, Sagat doesn't have the scar on his chest, of course, because that happened in this game. I mentioned earlier on about the game being released on a multitude of systems. It was released on, to name but a few, the Commodore 64, ZX Spectrum, Amstrad, DOS, Amiga, Atari SS, MS-DOS PC, TurboGrafx, PC Engine and more, as well as remasters that were released for the anniversary of Street Fighter that had this as a little Easter egg. The magazine, of course, that when this first came out, everyone raved about it. They said there's not a game like it, this is a real change of pace. But anyone remember the magazine CVG, Computer Video Games? They said it had absolutely no lasting appeal, which is just hilarious. Because let's face it, if there was a game that people are going to mention other than Mario and Sonic, Street Fighter has been around a long, long time. I mean, Street Fighter was around when FIFA was still crying in its cot. On top of that, Street Fighter, this went down so well, this game, that they released a deluxe version where the buttons were actually pressure sensitive to perform the moves. Of course, this was abandoned later, and in Street Fighter 2, light, medium, high punch and light, medium, high kick was then introduced, a system that stuck with Street Fighter right to the very end. But if we go back into the game now, once again we can only play as Ryu, so what we'll do is we'll now go up against Japan, and it's Retsu, whoever the hell Retsu is. Has anyone noticed Ryu's got red hair there? Does not look like Ryu. Okay, well this guy is super aggressive straight away, and my buttons do not want to respond. Let's have a look, make sure that carries on there. Oh, the special moves are just a pain to perform. Oh dear, that didn't go well for me. But I can see why this would be popular. I can. It's got the look of Street Fighter. You know, the layout of the buttons. Maybe not that health bar. Seems in a very bizarre location. But for the most part, the game is there. Street Fighter does exist within these pixels. But don't get me wrong, I'm going to take this guy to the cleaners. Why did the game do a slow-mo on that fireball? That was almost dramatic. That was worth just losing for that move. But alright, slightly less imaginative, but let's stop that bomb going off, shall we? And of course we can't select the country now. Now we are stuck with this god-awful round here, with this guy who I'm genuinely starting to detest. Let's have a look, see if we can perform this dippy move. Oh, we're getting somewhere. No, we're not. I'm surprised actually. One area about this, that Why did they change the colour of Ryu's hair? It can't be because of Ken, because they came around at the same time. There must be a reason why they changed the colour of this guy. That kick was savage. Anyone see that energy bar? Unbelievable. But I do genuinely think this should be kept as a memento more than as a game to be played. You can see Street Fighter's humble beginnings, but at the same time you can't tell me that this is representative of the Street Fighter we know today. Let's see if I can pin this guy in the corner. Okay, that was incredible. That move did not hit him. There we go. Get in! Now, of all the Street Fighter games I've played, of which there's quite a lot, I wouldn't say this is the worst Street Fighter ever made. If I wanted to know the worst Street Fighter ever made, that's Street Fighter the movie, the game, as featured in a previous video. This is playable to me, but only, oh wow, new character Geki, but only once again as a reminder. If I gave this to children these days, I can't imagine they'd be a big fan. Okay, that is beyond annoying. Okay, so we have invisibility and we have shuriken stars. I know that looked cheap what I did there, but I'm sorry, he started it. So let's have a look what this guy's got to say for himself. Oh no, wait, I've still got to wait another round, haven't I? Let's see if that was as easy as the first round. That business with the shurikens just now, that was insanely annoying. Okay, whether that's the precursor to Dal Sim's teleport or even Akuma's teleport later in the game, but I'll be honest, it's getting real old real quick. At least those shurikens didn't take much health off me. Now, as for all the difficulty of pulling off the moves in this, I've got to say, this is feeling a little bit satisfying. And you're actually you could be watching me become a convert right now. Oh wait, that was a strange one. Oh wow, what have we got here? Okay, so I think I may have pressed the button too short there, but do you know what? See, bonus stages. You can see the growth of Street Fighter within this. You can see the appeal, and fine, we have the map. So brilliant, we can actually see the map here. That was something that, of course, I thought started in Street Fighter 2. With the likes of Zangief and China, USSR and all that lark. Now, whether this is meant... You do feel that the characters are different. I've got to... Fair play to the game for that. This does feel like all the characters I'm fighting are inherently different characters. I don't feel like the game's jipping me in that respect. I say that, I might actually lose. Unbelievable. But the characters, your opponents, do feel different. They do. Whereas that ninja guy with that incredibly random teleport, which I couldn't tell whether I loved it or hated that. Whereas this guy seemed to be a lot more stationary. So, you know, fair play to the game. There is an attempt there at a unique AI. And I'll be honest, if I can't pull off this hurricane kick soon, I might just go crazy. Oh, look at that. Unbelievable. The backgrounds as well, although they are quite low rent in terms of the graphics. I mean, this is sub 8-bit. But at the same time, they look pretty good and they do move along. I think it is just a single layer. Here we go. Yep, I'll be honest, that's getting... Now, this better be Balrog. This better be a boxer. That better be Balrog. It better be a... There we are. Right. Now, if he's anything like the Balrog of Street Fighter 2 fame, this guy's going to be real annoying. Yep, he's got the reach of Balrog. And we've got Mount Rushmore of all things. Good lord. See, again, this game's starting to win me over. I think I went in a bit harsh. I can see the appeal. Not hugely. I can definitely see why this game would have been popular. Because I'm so used to the new Street Fighters that the idea that this Street Fighter, you know, nothing had came before this. There's nothing like this. I mean, don't get me wrong, the hit detection there was terrible. The fact that I could effectively teleport through that guy. Yeah, let's get that Hadouken. Now that was satisfying. Let's be honest, you watching this must have felt that the tiniest bit the way I did. But no, do you know what? I can definitely feel it better. I can see why. Oh, yeah, I know, there's plenty of fellas like me all over the world, blah, 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 blah. Oh, wow, what do we have here? Right, Wow, that was not fun. I'm not sure why it wouldn't let me go any further than that or perform a different move, but never mind. But, okay, so we can see the evolution of this game, gradually, slowly but surely. I mean, I don't know why most of these characters never made the cut, whether it was licensing them or they felt like they were a bit too two-dimensional. This guy reminds me of Wei Wu Long from Tekken, or maybe even Master Wei from the Street Fighter Alpha series. But I'll be honest, he is aggressive as hell. I mean, I don't know, I'm sorry this video is overrunning a little bit, but I've got to say, this, if I had to count the negatives right now, it is one, that game, the controls being so unresponsive, some pros, those graphics, some negatives, the sound isn't great. But again, I've got to stop judging this game by modern standards, because there's not that, I mean, you can't compare this to the likes of Street Fighter 2, 3, 4, etc. Now on top of this, when this game was first released, Capcom did think it was going to be a success. They obviously invested in it like a solid IP that they were going to be utilising. But at the same time, you know, when Street Fighter 2 came out, this game seems hardly ever referenced. I mean, even the license for Street Fighter, the Street Fighter 2049, a walk-along platformer with Ken, that will be featured here on Robbie's Arcade later on. Now this, finally, is a familiar character. Anyone that's played Street Fighter Alpha will be aware of Gen. He was kind of the master character. I believe he trained, in the narrative, he trained Geki, otherwise known as Akuma, not Guken, or lots of different versions of them. But, oh no, that did not go well, did it? But, as for this game's attitude towards character development, I can't tell whether I like or dislike the fact that some of these characters existed. Oh my god, this is so irritating. That some of these characters exist in later games, but not all. Because, on the one hand, it's nice they're reusing characters, but did they do that so they could say, oh, we featured this character once before, or out of laziness? In which case, what about Lee, Mike, Retsu? Some of these characters they renamed. Balrog, of course, was Mike. But personally, I would like to think that this game, although it doesn't stand the test of time playability-wise, it still should serve as something for the mantelpiece that says Street Fighter 1, this is where it all began. Because we're so used to these days some very few actually innovative titles that exist. But this has been Robbie's Arcade. You've been watching Street Fighter 1, and if you've got any other suggestions, pop them down in the comments. But otherwise, thanks for watching.